Hello, my name is Jillian Getlin, and this is my bean seed germination presentation. In this presentation, I will be discussing what my experiment entailed, the environment my seeds developed in, my observations throughout the process, a line graph to compare growth, the results of my experiment, and finally, my own personal reflection. To introduce my experiment, I will talk about what I did, how I did it, why I did it, and my question and hypothesis for my experiment. My question was, will lavender Epsom salt affect the growth of bean seeds? My hypothesis was that lavender Epsom salt would negatively affect the growth of bean seeds because the salt would absorb moisture in the bag and thus take water away from the growing plant. What did I do and how did I do it? I had 4 bean seeds, 2 for the control group, 2 for the experimental group. All 4 bean seeds received regular tap water and were soaked in this water for 1 hour. But the 2 bean seeds who were in the experimental group received 1 teaspoon of lavender Epsom salt in their water that they were soaked in. To make my observations easy to remember and understand, I named all 4 of my beans. My 2 salty beans were Blair and Cortland, and my 2 basic beans were Sarah and Matthew. And why did I do this? My roommate bought the bag of lavender Epsom salt and wanted to take a bath in it and see how it was. But he has very sensitive skin, so afterwards his skin was very red. So this made me wonder how it could affect my bean seed growth. And finally, as the result of my experiment, my 1 salty bean, named Blair, experienced growth while all the other beans did not. For my experiment, I recorded my observations every 2 days, beginning on the day where I soaked my beans for 1 hour before putting them in the bag. Because I needed to travel from my house to my apartment in New Paltz, I needed to find a way to travel with my beans while ensuring that their growth was not affected and that they received the same environmental conditions at all times. To solve this problem, I attached both baggies to 1 corkboard side by side. By doing this, both baggies received the same environmental conditions and were always safe if they needed to be moved around. Overall, my beans did not experience a lot of growth. In the beginning, all beans had wrinkled coats and experienced swelling. But it was not until day 6 that I observed that Blair had started to sprout. On the same day, I observed that Cortland had gained pink spots from the salt. Sarah, on the same day, had started to open, but not much more came from my seeds. Following that, Cortland and Sarah had openings that were continuing to open very slightly, but Blair was the only seed to experience any growth. Matthew had actually split open rather than opening and had gained dark black fuzz. For Blair's growth, you can see that as the days went on, she grew longer, her sprout was more green and thicker, and by day 10, her root now had little sprouts coming off of it. By day 12, all of my beans were now experiencing browning. Blair was still healthy, with the base of her root now brighter and thicker than before, but the long, thin sprouts coming off of it were now becoming brown. Cortland and Sarah were getting more and more brown every day, while Matthew was breaking apart more and becoming more brown. By day 16, Blair's growth had slowed to a crawl, and all of the beans were more brown with larger openings. And by day 18, all of the beans, except for Blair, had started to grow mold. By the end, all 4 beans had started to grow mold, with Sarah, Cortland, and Matthew's openings all larger, and with Blair's growth having seemed to stop. For my line graph, because only 1 of my beans experienced growth, I compared Blair, which had been subject to lavender Epsom salt, to one of the class data beans, which had been subject to reverse osmosis. As you look at the graph, you can see that the reverse osmosis bean grew far better than Blair, but they experienced similar intervals of high growth and low growth, as in the beginning, it took them both a few days to start growing. In the middle, they both experienced an influx of growth, and by the end, their growing had started to slow down. And finally, my summary and reflection. So, what happened? In this situation, contrary to my hypothesis, the salt improved the growth and health of the bean seeds, as you can see that Blair had grown a lot. Why do I think this happened? Well, perhaps the magnesium sulfate content in the Epsom salt, or perhaps the lavender or other natural oils in the salt supported the growth and health of the bean. As I reflect, I note that lavender Epsom salt is awesome because Blair grew so well. For me, this experiment was an enjoyable and educational experience. Not only did I get to create an experiment in my home where I had to deal with the different variables of keeping the experiment going properly and recording my observations, I got to learn more about how plants grow, which could help inform me as I go to teach young children in my future. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for viewing it, and I hope you have a fantastic day.